Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katherine Urban, and I'm a professional astrologer with over 16 years of astrological immersion, practice, and study. And we're trying something new here today. Yeah, it's a new era. Mars is out of retrograde, so is Venus, on to new and bigger, better things. And what we're going to do here today is we're going to answer some of your questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll explain more later, but let's get to our question. So I did an AMA on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and I got a really cool question. And that one had to do with reincarnation. And actually, one of my clients asked me this question last week too. So I thought I would go ahead and answer it here. So the question was, does the birth chart show any sort of indication of past lives? Now, first and foremost, the thing that a lot of people learn early on in the Western tradition, well, I should say the modern Western tradition, is to look to the lunar nodes. And I would definitely say that while this is something that has been more recently dispelled as something that we can't totally depend on as being the truth, I will say that I do resonate with it a lot. And basically what the saying is that the nodes indicate your past lives, specifically the South Node. The South Node is an indication of where we came from, allegedly. And the North Node is what we're meant to develop and do more of in this life. And I do really resonate with a lot of that, even as I've gone from like a modernist kind of background through the traditional, the Hellenistic, Arabic medieval, like it still seems to hold a lot of weight for me. But that's not the point of this video. My hot take on this is that the entire chart is karmic. The entire birth chart. That's right. So in the study of astrology, looking at a person's natal chart, this is the moment of the person's soul becoming enfleshed officially. I mean, obviously we know biologically that's happening for many months before that. The astrologers had ideas on that as well, and that like every month of gestation, the soul is descending through a different planetary sphere and slowly becoming enfleshed and incarnate. And at each sphere, they're taking on something else, some other commitment that the soul has for this lifetime. And anyhow, I would make a conjecture that the entire birth chart would be karmic, because the entire birth chart is telling us about our destiny in this life, whether we as spiritual beings had some level of participation in deciding what our aims and objectives were going to be in this lifetime, whether some of that is karmic, things that our higher escalons of soul guides and spirit guides and deities said, no, you must go to earth and you must experience this difficulty or this blessing. In either case, we might say that by looking at our birth chart, whether we have any kind of certainty or inkling about what happened before we were born and how our chart became our chart, we do know that our natal chart tells us about the current life. So here's a point of philosophical contemplation: is what decides that? What decides the level of comfort or discomfort I have in this lifetime? And I think it goes back to these ideas of karma, which many cultures have strived to create an understanding of. You know, I think a lot of this comes back to obviously like Indic philosophy, where we derive our modern understanding of what karma is, which, by the way, there are many different kinds of karma in that tradition. But also like the Stoics accepting of one's fate. Like, this is my fate, but why is this my fate? And the birth chart is one thing that tries to answer what our fate is, but why is this our fate? Why is this our destiny in this life? How much free will do I really have? And these are all really great questions. These are all really big questions, and I'm sure we could talk more about it. But sticking with indications of reincarnation, I've done a lot of work on past lives. I've done a lot of like meditations, workshops, trying to connect with previous beings, different time periods I lived in. And that was totally separate from astrology. But in my birth chart, I can see like, oh, this placement kind of connects with that sense of where I was at a different time. And we could hypothesize that, let's say you have like a planet in domicile, like let's say you've got Jupiter in Pisces, and you're just like inclined toward spiritual dimensions or imaginative dimensions. You have a lot of ability to zoom out and gather perspective. Maybe that could be an indication that you spent time in a past life as like a spiritual being, a philosopher, someone who was a seeker, someone who was an artist, a dreamer. And maybe some of those placements are less connected to a sense of where we were, and more connected to what we're to experience in this life. So I think it's a really personal experiment. If you look at your chart and you look at the things that come the most naturally to you, the things that look the most comfortable in your chart, that could probably very well be indicative of something that's familiar, something that you've done before. Whereas the aspects in your chart that are a little bit less familiar, the things that you tend to stumble with, philosophically speaking, those could hypothetically be things that you are newer to, that you're learning, you're trying to master, you're trying to get correct in this lifetime. And again, there is absolutely no certainty. There's no certainty to anything that I'm saying. These are all just things that I've meditated on, things that I've thought about. Another point in the chart that people look to is Saturn. A lot of times people will say, this is the Lord of Karma. This is an area of challenge. This is an area where I'm meant to learn some pretty big lessons in this lifetime. And some people would feel that about their Mars placement too, depending on if you're born at night. Saturn is going to be a planet that tends to show up as a planet that gives you a little bit more difficulty in this lifetime. Whereas if you were born during the day, Mars is said to be that planet. Now, there's always these mitigating circumstances and factors. And if you have questions about your particular chart, the best way to clarify that is to book a reading with me or another astrologer. We could talk about your chart and the planets that look the most challenging, or the planets that look like they are giving you the most ease. So again, I do think that this is a much more personalized experiment, something that you could spend time with your own chart and sort of parse out which placements feel like they are more in development in this lifetime, and some things that feel like they are more natural, like the moon. The moon is another placement that would indicate probably familiarity. Like we look to the moon to tell us about early childhood experiences. We look to the moon to tell us about nurturing. We look to the moon to tell us about our reactionary nature. And yeah, I mean, looking back at like babyhood, childhood, it's like in what is instinctual as well. It's not always going to describe everything that was done to you. Sometimes it's going to describe like how you are instinctively. And yeah, a lot of that could be explained by your early childhood environment, but what about previous lifetimes? So that would be another point of contemplation, is to look at the moon. But all in all, we don't ultimately have clear-cut textbook answers for this question, which is why in more recent years, astrologers have sort of pulled back away from rooting nodal delineation in past lives, because there's no way that we can concretely prove that. Although it is really fun to fantasize about, to imagine. And I would say pull that lens out to encapsulate the entire birth chart. Imagine what that is like. Another way that you might look at that is aspects that are separating could be things that are behind you. Aspects that are applying could be things that are in development, things that you encounter later, things that you continue to work on. So yeah, I hope that answers some of your questions about reincarnation, although I don't actually have concrete answers to share. But tell me what you think about this. Tell me if you have any thoughts about how your natal chart connects to some of your own inclinations about different time periods or different skills that you might have had in previous lifetimes. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in with me today. For more astrology in your world, you can connect with me on all platforms at Astro Catherine. You can also find me at catherineurban.com, where you can book your year ahead astrological consultation. We'll zero in on your natal chart, your secondary progressions, your perfections, your solar return, and we've even got the monthly breakdowns and transits, of course. You can also connect with me for horary astrology, which is a divinational form of astrology which allows you to ask one specific question by email. We also have electional services, rectification services, and I also have a whole slew of webinars available for download. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you. Bye.